And welcome back to Lesson 2 of the Introductory tutorial series for game development. Last time we talked about the reasons why you want to get into this field and why you want to do this. And chances are, if you're watching these videos, then you are very interested in game design. And first we have to go through what I like to call the reality check, the virtuous developer. We want to make sure that you understand the realities of this industry, because while software is getting more intuitive and resources are getting more available and there's communities all over the place, and it seems like everybody's making games today. The Android market, independent developers, third-party developers, first-party developers that make the systems, all those people, it seems like there's this whole culture of people that are doing games, so why not you? Well, you can, and you can go as far as being the lead developer in a project someday. But we have to make sure we understand how to get there. So the first thing I want to talk about is what I call the 7 virtues of a successful game developer. And these are some qualities that you should possess in order to be an effective developer, somebody who can really push through the good times and the bad times, because this is an ups and downs career, or as somebody might say, a hobby, career, job, whatever. It has its ups and downs, and we want to make sure that you keep your head on straight so that you can effectively do this long term. So one of the virtues is discipline. You have to be disciplined when you are taking on projects, because discipline makes all the difference, especially if you're just doing it by yourself. You have to make sure that you keep a straight head and that you discipline yourself to work through some of the late nights that you're going to be spending trying to figure out a problem that you have, or the long term where you're writing stories and trying to make different plot lines fit together. So you have to be disciplined. Another virtue, of course, is patience, and this is considered a virtue of human beings in general. That's my chair squeaking, sorry, but patience is important because you have to be patient, not just with the developing that you're doing, but also in your life, and know that this stuff is not necessarily going to happen overnight. We see people like Marcus Persson who developed Minecraft, and it seems like his success came overnight. But he spent years developing Java games and programs before he came up with the Minecraft concept, and even then it took him a full year of developing that concept before it actually started to catch on, and now 3 years after that he has been building the franchise and adding to it. So there's definitely patience involved, because this is going to take in some cases longer than you might be comfortable with, or longer than you might expect. Patience, very important. Another thing is focus. You have to stay focused. It is very advantageous to you as an individual, and to you if you are in a team situation, to stay focused on the goals and the project at hand. If you can't focus, you're going to have trouble moving forward in the project development and seeing it through to the end. So you have to remember to stay focused. You also should possess some problem-solving abilities, and we're actually going to talk about that in this lesson. So I'm not going to say too much about that, but problem-solving ability and being able to think logically is important. You must have an open mind. Open-mindedness is essential, because you are going to be toying with all kinds of ideas. You're going to be interacting with other people, and you might not always agree, or you might get stressed out, but it's important to keep an open mind and take in everything with a grain of salt, not take anything for granted, and just enjoy what you have, and be open to new suggestions and new ideas, especially when you actually start showing people what you're making. They're going to tell you things. We're going to have a spot in the community called the Grinder, which is not where games go to die, but you're going to post your creations, and the people might not always say things that make you feel good, but it is necessary for you to become a better developer and for your game to improve. You also must possess time management skills. This is important even if you're not working in a deadline-based situation. The industry is very deadline-based, because these things have to come out in a certain amount of time, so that not too much money is spent on the development that it doesn't make back up for it in the long run. And if you're an independent developer, or you're a one-man show or one-woman show, You have to budget your time to know that it's very rare for someone to develop a game in one day and release it and make $1,000,000. It usually takes several weeks or even months, and in some cases even years, to see these projects through. But if you can manage your time well, you're going to be successful. Finally, the 20 reasons. If you stick to your 20 reasons, you can use them as a reference down the road to remind yourself of why you started the project, and if something goes wrong or it doesn't go in a direction that you're comfortable with, you can refer to those 20 reasons and give yourself a little refresher, a little friendly reminder as to why you began in the first place. So those are the virtues that I think are most important and crucial to your success as a game developer. So the next thing we want to talk about is this problem-solving ability, because there is a process behind problem-solving. Now, some people might call this debugging in computer programming and game development, but debugging is kind of a separate corner of problem solving that's specific to working out problems within the engine itself. Problem solving in general is a process that I've outlined for you. So in Problem Solving 101, the first step is to identify the problem. A lot of this might sound obvious, and in most cases you do this naturally, very quickly in your mind without even realizing it. But when you break this process down, it puts it into perspective as to what's actually going on to make sure that you don't miss anything, so that you can effectively solve your problems, because if you have a problem and you don't solve it, you're going to get stuck, and then it becomes a wall that you have to overcome. So the first step is to identify the problem. Once you have effectively identified what's going on, the next step is to explore your options. Option A, B, C, and so on. Sometimes there might be 2 options, sometimes there might be many options, and problem solving is not limited in this case to having a real issue that you must tackle. Problem solving can also pertain to things like if you have multiple ways that you could design something in a game, you must explore the options to figure out which one is the best way to do things that allows your project to run most efficiently. Because, one example of this is low polygon modeling versus high polygon modeling. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. But high polygon modeling makes much more detailed models. It's the kind of things they use in film, where they make things ultra realistic because they have a very, very high polygon count, so they look very real. Whereas a low polygon model has a lot less information, which might not make it as detailed, but it consumes less memory and allows the program to run better. Whereas a high polygon model might look better but consumes more memory. So those are the kind of things you have to think about, not just, oh, this piece of code doesn't work, or I can't get this function to work, what do I do? So explore your options. Once you have your options laid out, the next thing you do is to execute, and this is to choose the best option from step 2 and then execute it, which means changing some code, working with a model, and making adjustments to see if the adjustments you make are going to solve the problem. And then once you've made those changes, it's time to test. And in the testing phase is where you put the execution phase into practice to actually observe what's going on. And once you've tested, there are 2 possible outcomes. Either the test was successful, and if it was, you can note, it's important that you note what happened, by the way, so that you can come back to it later. If you have a similar issue later on down the line, you can reference the problem that you had, the execution, the test results, and what happened, so that you can apply it later and then continue to your next issue. If you test and the outcome is unsuccessful, you must go back to your options and try a different approach. And also you want to eliminate the option that you used in the first place, obviously, so that you don't use it again. So this is just a basic way that the problem-solving process works. Now, one other thing that I'd like to mention before this lesson is over is to think about what kind of developer you are, okay? There are 3 main different kinds of development approaches, and you see them all the time in the mainstream especially, and also in the independent scene, but I'm just going to tell you what they are and then it'll make more sense. The first kind of developer is the follower. This kind of developer or development style is basically making a game that is very similar or I guess you could say a spin-off of a game or game genre that already exists. A good example of this is Call of Duty. Now, Call of Duty in and of itself is its own series made by Activision, uh, primarily. But there's also a lot of other kinds of games, such as Battlefield. Okay, Battlefield is very similar to Call of Duty. They're the same type of game. And so, if you make what you would consider a first-person shooter based on a wartime situation, you are following what other developers have done. Doesn't mean that you're just trying to copy necessarily, but it means that you're following that development pattern to make a game that's similar. Another type of development or development type is the innovator. An innovator will take a game style that previously has existed in a genre, and they will build on it, and they will try to add something to it to make it more unique. So it will still look similar, but it will have its own features that make it stand out among others. A good example of this is the different types of RPGs that we have. Now, they all follow the same basic principle, but some RPGs dare to go the extra mile and add features that you just won't find in any other game, and therefore cause it to be unique and can actually increase its success long term. And finally, you have the trendsetter. And the trendsetter is the developer that likes to do something completely different. They're developing something that just doesn't follow anything that's ever been seen before, doesn't really fit any kind of genre, or is a combination of genres, and they're just trying to start a new trend, try something new. So think about that when you're developing your games and you have ideas as to what kinds of ideas you're doing or what type of developer you are. Are you a follower? Do you like to build on concepts that already exist and try to make something similar? Are you an innovator? Will you take concepts that have been used and try to add to them to add some unique features to your game? Or are you a trendsetter, and do you like to do something completely off the wall that you, ironically enough, see in the indie community a lot? And these three are also measured by difficulty. Followers are usually the easiest kinds of developments because what you've seen already exists. It's not difficult to really adopt the game style that you have. An innovator might be considered medium difficulty because you're adopting previous concepts, but you're trying to add to it or change things to make it your own. And the trendsetter is generally more difficult because you basically have to start from scratch and try something completely different. So having said all this, you have a lot to think about. You've got your virtues, things that you want to make sure you are got in your mind so that you stay on track. You've got your problem-solving flowchart so that you understand the process that goes behind solving these problems. You can stick to that so that you have an even project flow. And finally, to decide what kind of developer you are and what kind of games you want to make. So I thank you for watching this tutorial video, and come back for lesson 3, where we will actually talk about the software we'll be using and do a little comparison to other engines as to why we are using this. So hope to see you in the next lesson.